just saw this massive change of inclusion that said no longer are we going to be called Boy Scouts, but we are now going to be called Scouting America. If it can change an organization that has been around for 114 years, what do you think it can do to women's sports? Guys, it's time for another episode of the Time to Man Up podcast. This is hitting a little different than the usual release time, but because of something that took place in our country, I want to hit on it now while it's fresh and while my mind is thinking about it. But we just experienced something that took place after doing something one way for 114 years. Something was changed. And what that change is by changing the name Boy Scouts to Scouting America. Now, that was a fact that I just learned, is that the Boy Scouts has been around for 114 years. That's amazing. I never realized that it was that old of an organization. So what we saw was a major shift in direction, which has already begun to have that when they began to allow girls into Boy Scouts, all in acceptance, wanting to be accepting. And plus, recently, there were 80,000 accusations of sexual abuse and a $2.46 billion settlement. I mean, guys, that's like one of the largest settlements ever. And that was to compensate some of these individuals for being sexually abused during their time in Boy Scouts. And the purpose of what we're doing is not to focus on that. It's not to focus on those sexual abuse cases. But what I want to do today is recognize the fact that for 114 years, this organization has been called the Boy Scouts. And of course, anyone that has gone to the store has at some point seen another group called the Girl Scouts. And right, the Girl Scouts are famous for the cookies that they sell. Some of those cookies, the Thin Mints, are off the charts. I think we all have one or two Girl Scout cookie types that we love. And for me, it was all about the Thin Mints. And then what happened is, due to this desire to be all inclusive, they opened it up to have girls join the Boy Scouts to be part of the boys. And what they were doing is they wanted people to see them as an inclusive group. But guys, here's the problem, is that the benefit, and I was never in Boy Scouts, to be honest. I never really wanted to ever be part of Boy Scouts. And I feel that there's two groups of guys. There's guys that love Boy Scouts and always wanted to be part of it. They love Boy Scouts. And then there was that group of guys that wanted nothing to do with it. And that is neither here or there whether Boy Scouts was great. Often you found that the guys that had sports teams that they were part of, not always, but a majority of them that had that camaraderie on the sports field, did not participate in Boy Scouts. Now, that does not mean that there were not athletic Boy Scouts, right? There were people that played sports that were Boy Scouts, and they went all the way through Eagle Scouts. But when we talk about this, my bigger concern is not sexual abuse cases or who all made up Boy Scouts, what type of guys were in Boy Scouts compared to ones that weren't. That isn't what I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is the fact that we just saw this massive change of inclusion that said no longer are we going to be called Boy Scouts, but we are now going to be called Scouting America. Guys, that's ludicrous. I'm just saying it's ludicrous. In all of this battle over gender, are you a man or are you a woman? What are you? Or whatever other terminology that you would use for who you are, which is a joke. I'm just saying what it is. It's a joke. It's not biblical. I mean, guys, God created man and woman. We've talked about this before. But what happens is this: you have to pay attention to what happens behind the scenes, because what happens is this: there's a lot of noise around the perimeter, right? But while all the noise is taking place around the perimeter, what's happening is the attack is on the inside, right? And the attack is on the inside. And there are all of these things, whether we're talking about transgender athletes or Boy Scouts becoming Scouting America, it begins to eat away and eat away. Before you know it, it's not there. And I want to tell you this. This is a far conclusion, but I think this is what you're going to see. You are going to see more and more female sports disappear. Why? Because of this act of inclusion. If it can change an organization that has been around for 114 years, what do you think it can do to women's sports? When we are honest with ourselves, guys, there's no way that God ever created men and women to compete on the athletic field together. It just doesn't happen. And I was recently even talking to someone in the area of they're bowling. And so this is based on what they told me, that now even for adult bowling, they're going toward that all inclusivity. Guys, we're just different, and that's okay. But to have the Boy Scouts become Scouting America in the name of inclusivity, what we see is that this was the one place that some young men, some boys coming through Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, where they learned how to do man things, right? How they learned what it looked like to be a man. I mean, right? This organization that we have is Time to Man Up. And there were some amazing scout troops that were doing amazing things to train up men to be future husbands, future dads. And they were doing an amazing job at it. I know some men that came the entire way through the Boy Scout system, and they are awesome guys. And they give credit to the Boy Scouts for the investment that was made in their lives. And then all of a sudden, we get rid of that. Now, when we started a church softball team in my last ministry, they didn't have a softball team. And so myself and another guy said, let's start a team. So we did. And there were times along the way where there were women who were very good softball players, and they would want to be part of the team. Why? Because other churches had mixed teams with men and women on it. I stood pretty firm on that to say it's only going to be men. We had backpacking trips. I stood firm to say it's only going to be men. Why? Because men talking with men, it's just very different than when you bring women into it. And guys, that's not saying it's inappropriate. We just, as men, we talk different, right? I mean, be honest. If you're sitting around the campfire or sitting on the bench during a softball game with a bunch of guys, you might even let something slip like a fart, right? Whereas with girls around, you're going to hold that thing in as hard as you can, as tight as you can, and you're going to try to wait till you get out in the outfield or something. It's different. And it changes the whole climate, the whole culture. And I know it's so easy to say, well, maybe you shouldn't be saying those things. It doesn't mean it's inappropriate. I'm just saying we interact with men differently than we interact with women. And we want to keep those opportunities. So, what in the world is wrong with having Boy Scouts and having Girl Scouts? That's great. I mean, that is the perfect scenario. But what we wanted is we did not want to appear that we were holding anyone out. Well, we weren't. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. I think that covers it all. So then what happens is, in the name of inclusion, we do this. Guys, like I said before, at what point in the name of inclusion do we get away with women's college basketball, women's college softball, soccer? I mean, go down the list and say, you know what? We want to be all inclusive. And so if you want to try out, you're going to have to try out for one team: the college soccer team, the college baseball team, the college basketball team. Because in the name of being inclusive, we're going to bring this all together. And I know right now you're thinking that is so far-fetched. Let me remind you, for 114 years, this organization was called the Boy Scouts. And in one decision, and we can argue whether to change the perception of people because of all the sexual abuse. And I heard it said last night, and I love this statement: rather than changing the name, let's change the culture, right? Rather than changing the name from Boy Scouts to Scouting America so you can be all inclusive, why don't we do a better job of screening the men that lead these groups? Because there are a lot of good men out there leading scout troops. A lot of good men. I know some of them, and they're amazing. And I love the way they are investing in guys. I mean, they are working with young boys who come from homes with no male leadership, no male role model. And so they provide them with what it looks like to be a man. Guys, you can't go wrong with that. That's a great thing to do, to teach them how to do guy things. I mean, right? If you're a guy in a single home with your mom, you need a guy investing in your life. And the church should be a place where that happens. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen there. And so a group like the Scouts, the Boy Scouts, is a place where they can get that. So I just wanted to take some time today, and I'm not going to go too long on this, but it really just, when I saw that it had changed, and I learned that this has been around for 114 years, I thought, how sad that we have removed from young men this opportunity to go on adventures together, to work towards skills, to become the men they need to be in being the husbands they need to be, the dads they need to be, the men in their community that we need them to be. And instead, we have watered it down in the name of inclusivity and called it Scouting America. I just want to say this: shame on America. Shame on America. Because we have just sacrificed something, and I know this: once you go this direction, you will never get it back. So today I say goodbye to the Boy Scouts. And to be honest, it's kind of a day of mourning, because we have lost one of the avenues that has always done a great job of helping young men become men. And that's gone. And you can say, well, it's still around. It's Scouting America. No, it won't be the same. In the name of inclusivity, we have destroyed this structure that it was established to build into young men's lives. What that means is, church, men, we need to step up, and we need to do something that helps these young men, especially those that don't have a male role model in their life. Well, guys, that's what I got for us today. Make sure to like, subscribe, Give that thumbs up. Anything you can do to help us get the word out. But we want to continue to take on these issues in our country. We can't remain silent on these things. And unfortunately, usually we're reacting to them rather than keeping them from happening, right? Being proactive on them, we react to them. So guys, have a great day. And again, get the word out. It's time to man up.